The sound of running water stopped him cold. Mark Evans stood frozen in his own hallway, keys still dangling from his fingers, as the unmistakable hiss of his shower echoed through the small apartment. His 6-year-old daughter Sophie was at her grandmother's until tomorrow. Nobody should be home. Nobody should be using his shower. The familiar weight of exhaustion from a 12-hour shift at the hospital where he worked as a nurse suddenly vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that made his hands tremble. Before we continue this incredible true story, if you're enjoying content like this, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Your support helps us bring these touching real-life moments to viewers around the world. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs as he inched toward the bathroom door. The past 3 years as a single dad had taught him caution, had taught him that everything in his world could change in an instant. Since losing his wife to cancer, he'd learned to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared him for what waited behind that door. He thought about calling the police, but something held him back. The building was secure, the doorman knew him well. How could an intruder have gotten in? Steam billowed out as he pushed it open, revealing a slender silhouette behind the frosted glass. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, melodic, hummed softly over the sound of dripping water. The tune was vaguely familiar, something classical that his late wife used to play on the piano. The coincidence sent a chill down his spine despite the humid air filling the small bathroom. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice catching with sudden fear. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of someone pressing themselves against the shower wall. Mark couldn't speak, couldn't move. His mind raced through possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was this some elaborate mistake? Had he somehow entered the wrong apartment in his exhaustion? No, the family photos in the hallway were definitely his. The crayon drawings magnetized to the refrigerator were Sophie's latest masterpieces. This was definitely his home. The shower door slid open just enough for a face to peer out, wide-eyed and terrified. Dark hair plastered against pale skin, eyes the color of amber widened in shock. "Oh my God," the woman gasped, clutching the shower door closed again. "You're not supposed to be home. They said you wouldn't be back until 7. Her voice trembled with panic, and Mark could see her knuckles widening as she gripped the edge of the shower door. "This is my apartment," Mark managed, finding his voice at last. His throat felt dry, his words coming out rougher than intended. "Who are you and why are you in my shower? And who told you I wouldn't be home?" His mind immediately went to Sophie. Was she safe? Had someone targeted his family? "Your apartment? This is 4B, right?" The woman's voice had a slight accent he couldn't place, something that softened her consonants in a way that would have been charming under any other circumstances. "This is 3B, Mark said, the confusion evident in his voice. He took a step back, giving her space while maintaining his position between her and the door. "You're in the wrong apartment." What happened next would change both their lives forever. Her name was Ellie Chen, a kindergarten teacher who had just moved into the building yesterday. The landlord had given her the wrong key, a key that somehow worked in Mark's lock. A master key, she would later learn, accidentally handed to her in the chaos of move-in day. Exhausted from moving boxes all day, she'd let herself into what she thought was her new apartment, drawn a shower, and stepped in without noticing any of the family photos or the dinosaur-themed shower curtain that clearly didn't belong to her. The layout was identical to her own unit 1 floor above, and in her fatigue, she hadn't registered the subtle differences in decor. "I'm so sorry," she said, wrapped in Mark's towel, her face flushed with embarrassment. Water dripped from her hair onto the bathroom tiles, creating small puddles at her feet. "I can't believe this happened. I should call the landlord right away. This is mortifying." She clutched the towel tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Mark should have been angry. He should have called the police. Instead, he found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. The absurdity of the situation hit him all at once, and something inside him that had been wound tight since his wife's diagnosis 3 years ago suddenly uncoiled. "At least let me make you a cup of coffee while we sort this out," he offered, turning away to give her privacy. "I think we both could use one after this shock. There's a robe hanging on the back of the door you can borrow." It was my wife's, but... He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. Something in his tone must have conveyed what he couldn't say. "I'm so sorry," Ellie said again, but this time he knew she wasn't apologizing for the shower. "I'll be out in a minute." That cup of coffee turned into dinner. Mark ordered pizza, half pepperoni for him, half vegetarian for her, and they sat at his small kitchen table, the initial awkwardness giving way to genuine conversation. Ellie had moved from Seattle for a fresh start after a relationship ended badly. Mark told her about Sophie, about his work at the hospital, about the community garden he'd started on the building's roof as a way to cope with grief. Dinner turned into friendship. Ellie lived just one floor above, and they began to run into each other regularly, in the laundry room, by the mailboxes, at the corner cafe where they both, it turned out, liked to grade papers and catch up on charting, respectively. Sophie took to Ellie immediately, fascinated by her colorful clothes and the origami animals she could fold from napkins. And friendship slowly blossomed into something neither of them had been looking for. The first time Mark realized his feelings had changed was when Ellie called in a panic. A pipe had burst in her classroom, ruining months of student projects. Without hesitation, he'd taken the day off work to help her salvage what they could and recreate what they couldn't. Watching her kneel on the wet classroom floor, carefully drying children's artwork, he felt something shift inside him, a door opening to a room he thought he'd locked forever. But their journey wasn't without obstacles. Sophie was protective of her father and suspicious of this stranger who had literally appeared out of nowhere. "Daddy, do you like Miss Ellie more than Mommy?" she asked one night, her small face serious in the glow of her nightlight. The question had knocked the wind out of him. "No one could ever replace your mommy," he'd told her, choosing his words carefully. "The heart is amazing, sweetheart. It can hold love for lots of different people, all at the same time, and none of that love takes away from the others." Mark's in-laws worried he was moving on too quickly, that he was trying to replace their daughter. His mother-in-law, Barbara, had been particularly vocal about her concerns. "It's only been 3 years, Mark," she'd said during one of her visits to take Sophie for the weekend. "Are you sure you're not just lonely? That this woman isn't just convenient because she lives in the same building?" The words had stung because there was a grain of truth in them. He was lonely. The nights after Sophie went to bed stretched endlessly before him, filled with silence and memories. But Ellie wasn't a convenience or a replacement. She was entirely herself, stubborn, passionate about education reform, terrible at cooking but determined to improve, addicted to true crime podcasts that kept her up at night. And Ellie carried her own baggage, a broken engagement that had left her wary of commitment, especially to a man with a child. Her fiancé had cheated on her with a coworker, leaving Ellie with trust issues that surfaced at unexpected moments. The first time Mark had to cancel plans because Sophie was sick, Ellie had gone silent for 3 days, convinced it was an excuse, a gentle way of pulling away. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed to Mark one night, 6 months after their unusual first meeting. They sat on his fire escape, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over the neighborhood. "I'm not cut out to be anyone's mother. I can barely keep my plants alive. What if I mess up? What if Sophie grows to hate me? What if I'm just a placeholder until someone better comes along?" "I'm not asking you to be her mother," Mark said quietly, reaching for her hand in the growing darkness. Sophie already had a mother who loved her very much. "I'm just asking if you might have room in your heart for both of us, exactly as we are. Imperfect. Still healing. But trying our best every day." Ellie didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "I'm scared," she finally whispered. "Not of loving you both, I already do. I'm scared of losing you. Everyone I've ever loved has left. I can't promise we'll be together forever, Mark said honestly. Life taught me not to make those promises. But I can promise that right now, in this moment, there's nowhere else I'd rather be than here with you. The turning point came during Sophie's school play. Ellie sat nervously in the audience, watching as the little girl forgot her lines. The panic on Sophie's face was heartbreaking, until she spotted Ellie in the crowd. Something passed between them, a moment of connection that transcended words. Ellie mouthed the forgotten line, and Sophie beamed, continuing her performance with renewed confidence. Later that night, as Mark tucked Sophie into bed, his daughter whispered, "I like Miss Ellie, Daddy. She remembers things, just like Mommy used to." Mark's eyes filled with tears. "Your mom would have liked her too, sweetheart. Do you think Mommy sent her to us?" Sophie asked, her voice heavy with sleep. "Mrs. Garcia at school says sometimes angels send us people when we need them." Mark smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "I don't know, sophomore. But I like to think your mom would want us to be happy." 2 years after the shower incident, Mark proposed. Not with a grand gesture, but with a new key to his apartment, their apartment, tied with a ribbon around a small velvet box. They were in the rooftop garden, surrounded by the tomato plants and herbs they'd grown together, Sophie helping by watering everything in sight, including their shoes. "Are you sure?" Ellie asked, tears streaming down her face as she held the key and the ring, a simple emerald that had belonged to his grandmother. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Because I'm not perfect. I'll forget to buy milk and I'll work late during parent-teacher conferences and sometimes I need to be alone when I'm sad." "I've never been more certain of anything," Mark replied, taking her damp hands in his. "Some people spend their whole lives looking for the right person. I just got lucky, you broke into my apartment." He paused, his voice growing serious. "I know what it's like to plan a future with someone and have it all taken away. I know how fragile promises can be. But I want to make them anyway. With you." Sophie bounced between them, her small hands clasping theirs. "Say yes, Miss Ellie. Say yes so you can live with us forever and ever." Ellie knelt down to Sophie's level, her eyes still shining with tears. "Is that what you want, Sophie? For me to be part of your family?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "You already are. Daddy said so." Their wedding was small but joyful, held in the community garden Mark had started. Neighbors helped decorate, stringing lights between the trellises and setting up chairs between rows of vegetables. Sophie served as flower girl, beaming with pride as she watched her father and Ellie exchange vows. She wore a dress that matched Ellie's, simple white cotton with embroidered wildflowers, and a crown of daisies in her hair. During the reception, Mark's mother-in-law approached Ellie with a gift, a framed photo of Mark's late wife, Catherine, holding newborn Sophie in the hospital. The gesture was unexpected. Barbara had been the most resistant to their relationship, the most protective of her daughter's memory. "She would want you to have this," the older woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not to remind you that you're second, but to show you that you're part of our family story now. All of it. The joy and the sorrow. Catherine would have liked you, I think. You're nothing alike, but you both love fiercely." Ellie hugged the older woman, the photo frame pressed between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise I'll make sure Sophie always knows how much her mother loved her." Life wasn't perfect after that. They argued about bills and parenting decisions. They weathered Sophie's teenage rebellion and Mark's career setbacks. When Ellie miscarried in their 3rd year of marriage, the grief nearly tore them apart. Mark wanted to talk about it constantly, while Ellie retreated into silence. They learned, painfully sometimes, how to bend without breaking, how to fight without wounding, how to forgive without forgetting. When Sophie was 16, she went through a phase of rejecting Ellie completely. "You're not my real mom," she shouted during one particularly heated argument about curfew. "Stop pretending you are." The words had hung in the air between them, sharp as knives. "I've never pretended to be your mother," Ellie had replied quietly. "But I have loved you as my daughter from the moment you helped me fold paper cranes for my classroom. That's not pretending. That's just the truth." Later that night, Sophie had crept into their bedroom, eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean it. I was just mad." "I know," Ellie said, making room for her on the bed. "It's okay to be mad. It's even okay to say things you don't mean sometimes. That's part of being human. Dad said you might leave because of what I said." "Your dad worries too much," Ellie smiled, brushing Sophie's hair back from her face, the same gesture Mark had used when Sophie was small. "I'm not going anywhere. We're family. The real kind, not the pretend kind." Through it all, they had each other, a family forged from chance and cemented by choice. When Sophie left for college, Mark and Ellie converted her bedroom into a study where they could work side by side, he on his nursing research, she on her doctoral dissertation in early childhood education. They traveled during school breaks, checking countries off the list they'd made during those early coffee dates. They fostered rescue dogs, planted new varieties of tomatoes in the garden, and learned to dance salsa in their living room. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Ellie turned to Mark with a smile. The years had left their mark on both of them, silver threading through his dark hair, laugh lines deepening around her eyes. But when he looked at her, Mark still saw the startled woman from his shower, wrapped in his towel, apologizing profusely. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I'd gotten the right key that day?" she asked, swirling the wine in her glass. "If I'd gone to 4B instead of 3B? We might have passed each other in the hallway for years without ever really meeting." Mark took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band on her finger. The emerald engagement ring sat beside it, catching the last rays of sunlight. "I think some doors are meant to be opened, even when we don't know what's waiting on the other side." "That's very philosophical for a man who still can't remember to put the toilet seat down," Ellie teased, leaning into his side. "I contain multitudes," he replied with mock seriousness. "Besides, I think we were inevitable. If it hadn't been the key, it would have been something else. Maybe you would have flooded your apartment and I would have come to the rescue. Or maybe Sophie would have recruited me for a school project. Or maybe we would have fought over the last bunch of basil at the farmer's market." Ellie laughed, the sound still as musical to him as it had been that first day. "I like our story better. It's more dramatic. Single dad comes home to find beautiful stranger in his shower. It sounds like the beginning of a movie. A movie where the beautiful stranger becomes his wife and helps raise his daughter and builds a life with him that he never thought he'd have again," Mark finished, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with mistakes. Sometimes strangers become family. And sometimes, when we least expect it, love finds its way home, even if it has to use the wrong key to get there." If this story touched your heart, remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Life is full of unexpected moments that can change everything, just like that wrong key changed Mark and Ellie's lives forever. Share your own stories of unexpected meetings in the comments below, and join our community of believers in second chances and serendipitous encounters. Who knows? Your story might inspire our next video.